Oh, folks, what an episode we have for you today. It's another Bad Book Club, and this is part one of our discussion of Yudkowsky's Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. Now, you can read this. It's available for free. Just search it and you'll get it. It's very, very long. So for a variety of reasons, you may not want to read it, but you can. It's available for free. Patreon.com/late night, video episodes, ad-free, all that stuff. Go over there to support the show and enjoy part one of Bad Book Club. Part two coming next week.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Ryan. How are you feeling?
I'm mad. I'm mad at you. I'm mad at Adam Becker. I'm mad at the entire community of rationalists. I'm mad at basically everyone I've ever met. But that's not a feeling. It's what logic dictates. But you might ask, how do I know I'm actually mad and I'm not just fooling myself into believing that I'm mad? And I would re-query you. How do you know that I know that?
I'm noticing that I'm confused.
Just like a good little girl.
Oh my God, we can't do this so early.
Right out of the gate with that one. Yeah.
Well, right before we got on the call, Brian pointed to the fact that I have gotten through 62% of this thing, which is far exceeds what we agreed upon.
We agreed on chapter 30, and then you were like, please try to make it to 45, which I actually made it through chapter 46, which is 37% of this thing. And you are on chapter
75. But you said that was it. Say the thing that you said to me.
What I said is there is no surer sign of mental illness than the fact that you seem to be on track to finish this fucker. And if I was ever unsure, okay, here we go. If rationally I was interrogating the fact that you claim to be mentally ill, how could I look for evidence of that? Let's say I discounted the entire time I've known you. The fact that you are going to finish this book. I texted you earlier today and I was like, you're really going to finish this thing, aren't you? And you said, what'd you say?
What did I say?
You said, yes, mostly out of spite.
Okay, yeah, that is true. Look, if I'm going to be a hater, I want to be thorough. And I honestly wish that I'd gotten through all of it.
Speaking of which, I'm drinking a haterade.
A haterade, a literal haterade. Well, cheers to your haterade with my Vietnamese cold brew coffee. So yeah, I feel like there's a good bit of setup that we need to do here in explaining who the author is and what this is and why the fuck we're sitting here and why I'm wasting my life reading this.
Yes. So the context for this is a couple episodes ago, probably 3 or 4 now. We were talking to our friend Adam Becker, who wrote the wonderful new book, More Everything Forever, about basically Silicon Valley bullshit and kind of singularity, AI, etc. enthusiasts. And there is a fairly passing mention of this fan fiction written by, and I'm going to pronounce the guy's name wrong, Eliezer Yudkowsky. Is that how you say
Eliezer Yudkowsky?
Eliezer Yudkowsky.
I think.
Who is
I'm not even going to put any respect on it. There's no.
Actually, you should present your object evidence first before resulting to. God.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy who is, I guess, a well-regarded person in, AI thought circles, although you can read what Adam thinks about that in his book. It's
He's
mentioned
also
that
the founder of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, which
Less Wrong blog.
Yes, very important to the rationalist community. But I'll tell you what, if you go to the Miri website, what the first thing you see is, because I think it really pins the tail on the donkey. The AI industry is racing towards a precipice. The default consequence of the creation of artificial superintelligence, ASI, is human extinction. Our survival depends on delaying the creation of ASI as soon as we can for as long as necessary. Now, Yudkowsky and Miri has the ear of many influential...
Lots of people.
Lots of influential people, and Miri has received generous millions of dollar donations from notably Peter Thiel.
Yeah. And you're welcome, I might add, for mine.
Right, of course. So this is not like a totally fringe person. He's very much in the same realm as like neo-reactionaries like Nick Land and Curtis Yarvin, who kind of also rose out of this like 2000s blogosphere. And for those who are familiar with the thought idea of Rocha's basilisk, that came out of Less Wrong and also originated. Yudkowsky shut down that thread.
Leighton, you have to stop talking about this right now.
Yeah, no, the phrasing...
We're so fucked if you keep talking about it.
The phrasing, listen up, idiot, and it then being a message like, the only way that AI would know, which... For listeners, Rocha's basilisk is this idea that if a superintelligence AI was created and it learned that there were people who had not actively contributed to its creation, it would then retroactively torture all of those people for all time. To which Yudkowsky's...
if I may, in AI speak, and let me translate here, a bye-bye is what it would say. It would be like, you fucked, basically.
Yeah. Like an 80s movie bully. But then, of course, naturally, Yudkowsky rationally shut down this discussion by screaming at this guy and deleting the thread under like, it's never going to get this idea unless it sees people talking about the blackmail, you idiot. And for those of you in the know about how Elon Musk and Grimes met was because Musk searched for the phrase Rococo's basilisk, which is a fun pun that literally means nothing. And that's how he found Grimes and they got together.
What, was that a Grimes song or something?
It was a tweet that she made. And so he slid into the DMs after that.
I didn't know that. I see.
Yeah. So that's Yudkowsky's fault also. I'm saying that in jest, but kind of not really.
I can only assume that pairing was based on logic, facts, perhaps.
Oh, indeed. And this fan fiction, what's the name of the girlfriend of Sam Bankman-Fried, who also...
I'm proud to say I have no fucking idea.
Okay, great. But her username on Tumblr was World Optimization, and she made many posts about Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. So... And if you look at the Wikipedia page, which surely was either written by Yudkowsky or one of his many dick writers, all of the reaction to Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality is just like the most glowing reviews possible. And it's from like pretty prominent people.
Yeah, people, according to that site or that article, rave about this book. Everything about it is great. It's, not only, I mean, it's kind of a foundational text, which actually does seem to be true that this is some kind of foundational text for some people, which is absolutely mind annihilating. But, if there's one thing I learned from this book, it's that if there's a fact that you don't like that makes you feel bad, you shouldn't avoid it. You should race towards it. And the fact that makes me feel bad is that people seem to love this book.
Yeah, so I would like to say up top, I know people have brought this up in the past when we do bad book clubs, that, and I've seen both sides of this, that listening to us rip into things that they like is emotionally difficult. I see that. I hear it. I understand it.
Of course.
Also, that it's quote unquote off-putting when we talk about the authors of these works.
That's the brand.
This is just me saying up top that if you're big into rationalism and you love Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality and you really care about Yudkowsky and his feelings and his train of thought, this is not for you.
Get in my DMs now because my marriage is open and that's the type of person I want to be with temporarily.
You know what I want to say and I'm not going to say it because I'm not going to stoop to the level of...
I don't know what you're going to say.
No, so it's impossible to talk about this work without talking about Yudkowsky and his beliefs, because he spent the past 25 years writing on the internet, and he's a long-winded blowhard. So there exists so much documented nonfiction about what he believes and why he believes it in classic rationalist fashion. Mm-hmm. And those beliefs are espoused through the work of Harry Potter and the Methods of Craptionality.
What? They are?
It's a manifesto. What else was I... God, I had a point that I was going to bring up.
You were talking about how it might make some people feel bad.
Right. So this is not for you. And a thing that I've noticed in all of my reading, in reading Less Wrong comments and some of Yudkowsky's nonfiction, the terms of engagement that rationalists have online, like the rules that they have for them being willing to talk to you about things, is this like manufactured rubric of how you're allowed to engage, and that you need to start with object level criticism. And if you have anything personal or snide, it needs to go at the end. And then you need to be able to back it up.
They're not going to like this episode.
Yeah. This is not what this is.
No.
It is emphatically not. This is a comedy show, and I hated this shit, and I'm very mad about it. So, yeah, it's irrational. I'm confused. Feel free, but I'm not going to read your 10-paragraph comment. So thank you very much for your input. Take it to Less Wrong.
Yeah, the goal of this, we are not trying to debate. I mean, honestly, as for everything pretty much I read, there were some things that I would have thought were, shall we say, fringe beliefs. But at least in terms of the fact-based stuff, yeah, okay, it seems to get a lot right. I didn't think about it carefully. We're not doing a fact-based criticism of this work. That's a very good point. We're just talking about how much we hated this thing, and we both hated it. And we're going to have, look, here are some logical fallacies that are going to be on display in this very episode. Ad hominem attacks.
Ad hominem, right? Hardcore, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're going right at that hominem.
I'm going to add all over that hominem.
Mm-hmm. Wait.
She ad on my
yeah, what was it?
She ad on my hom till I nim.
Until I was going to say until I rationalize. No, there's a better one though. We can do better than that. Till I conclude.
That's so good. She ad on my homonym till I conclude.
There it is. Anyway, yeah. So we're just talking. This is not a rational response.
This is a therapy session.
But I
Dr.
think, I do think, well, thank you for using my title. By the way, if anyone needs to see my qualifications, just go to my
your
Wikipedia.
Priors? Are you checking your priors?
My Bayesian priors, that's right. If anyone needs to see my qualifications, go to my Wikipedia page, which by the time this airs will have been thoroughly defaced by hopefully an army of haters.
Yeah, the rationalists seem to have a penchant for rationalist behavior of anybody who dares criticize this thing. So
yeah, and look, okay, this is an interesting community to me, because I would like to think of myself as a rationalist. I am a scientist. I am trained in such things. I'm also part of the skeptics movement, the pro-science skeptics movement. This community, I'm sure, has some overlap with that. In fact, the guy fucking name drops Michael Shermer, who, I mean, that less said about that, the better. But there's definitely overlap. The way I see people in this community conducting themselves makes me go actually insane. It is, I would like, I'd like to be able to say, yes, that's the community of people I want to be with. People who are trying to argue like rationally, blah, 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 blah. But there is so much extra baggage and bullshit attached to this type of person who's in, and I'm not talking about Yudkowsky himself necessarily. I'm just talking about this whole community. It is very off-putting to me as a blanket statement. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not going to fall into this trap of qualifying everything I say with every possible exception. I'm just going to say this shit turns me off and drives me nuts.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that the fact that this is used as I mean, look at the name and the methods of rationality that is pitched to people as a primer for getting into the rational community, and that it's the demonstration of using those skills and applying them in the world of Harry Potter. It's, in my opinion, as a layman, as someone who is outside this community, this is Layman Night with Brian Wecht.
Yep, of course. Very good that we both went for it.
That was
Very
incredible.
good.
We have a mind melt right now.
Yes, that's true. Well, it's the only rational joke.
As a layman's take coming into this thing as a non-sciencey person, and potentially the same level of formal education that one Eliezer Yudkowsky has in these topics, which we'll get to in a bit. This is not an accessible text for a lot of reasons. And I mean that in terms of like the pedagogy of it. If you're using it as a tool to teach the reader about these ideas, you have failed. If you wanted to condescend to the reader and give like unclear and just not good explanations of things while stuffing it with jargon so you can sound smart, that's not how you teach people.
I'm going to disagree with you slightly. I think it is a great method for getting people as a primer for the rationalist community, because if you can get through 600,000 words of a man lecturing you, then you are ready for the rationalist community. So at that level, I think it's actually a very, very good way in, because if you get to the end of this and you're like, that felt like something I could use more of, you know what? Get ready for blogs, baby.
No, literally halfway through, he's like, if you're enjoying this, check out my other work, Sequences, which really is a primer for this whole thing. And it's like similarly lengthed nonfiction about the same ideas. Like, check it out and like donate to Miri.
I heard, actually, speaking of Miri, I heard that she and Zach made a porno.
This is good. This is good. As much as we can shed the rationalist by making hacky jokes in an arch style, as we typically do, I think we...
Hacky? That was a good joke. I mean, I do make hacky jokes. I will
Give me an example of
a
hacky joke you've made.
I'm going to cut you into small pieces.
Okay, Germa.
Like from the Lonely Island?
You keep on thinking that. So I have an entire multi-page thing of notes, and I should have realized that it's going to be way harder to integrate these as we talk about them. But I want to say, first of all, because this is important context for the work itself, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality is 660,000 words long. As a point of reference,
and you feel every one of them.
It is longer than War and Peace by 100,000 words.
A famously long book.
Now, because I did the extra credit work and I went past our 45 chapter limit, I finally got to a bit where I was like, this is tolerable. It's all right.
Which is around, do you remember around what? Because I haven't gotten there yet. So it's after chapter 46.
For people who are, maybe it was around 55 or something, it's the Escaping Azkaban arc, which is kind of like its own self-contained little thing. Now, the thing is, by the time I got to that point, it was about 300,000 words deep. So the pitch is, hey, do you want to read the entirety of Eric Karenina, but it sucks, and then at the end of it, it's good, and then you have to read Anna Karenina again with no promise of if it's going to return to that level, which, to be very clear, the part that I'm referring to as good is just such an improvement. It's not actually good. It's like you've been reading 300,000 words of fucking lecture-y trash, and then it's like, oh, some action, some interesting conversations. Plot happening, actual plot, and not lectures.
So up till the point I got to, this book consists entirely of characters I hated doing nothing that matters to anybody, and sometimes even themselves. Like there's no reason for anything to happen except as a way of, I guess, conveying these ideas, which at some point, the pedagogy becomes so sparse that you're like, wait, I guess now you're just writing this because it's like a thing you want to write.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is not lectures. Actually, it might even be a little better if there were more, if it was only lecturing. Because
once he starts writing action, it's like, oh my God, please kill me.
We'll get into that, but there is an extensive sequence where and of course the classic 3 Harry Potter characters, you've got Harry, of course, Hermione, yep, and the third, Draco, because Ron Weasley is the dumbest fuck in Dumbfuckville. And
there's no reason for him to exist.
Pops in every so often to do nothing, gets his ass handed to him essentially immediately, and then just fucks off forever.
Which, you know what? This is kind of a stock Harry Potter fan fiction thing, as with any fan fiction thing, but people love Draco. So I think that it is at least interesting that Ron is removed and Draco kind of takes his place there.
Yep.
I'm going to try to steelman Yudkowsky in the tradition of the Rationalist as much as possible here. So I'll give him that, at least. And I think on this note, I'll say, I think that fan fiction is inherently like one of the most intimate forms of art, because you have an established universe that you care enough about. That you care enough about that you're willing to play in that space and extrapolate. And it's extremely self-indulgent. Like it doesn't exist other than to be self-indulgent and exploring your own creative desires. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And it's an important outlet. And I think it's generative. And I think it's one of the biggest compliments that somebody could have to your original creative work, that they want to play in that space with you. Wonderful. That's all you could really hope for. But in the way that they are so self-indulgent, they end up being so much more revealing about a person's life and beliefs and emotional state than any other form of art, whether it's something that's sort of like this, which is like a speculative fan fiction, versus erotic fan fiction. Like, there's no way to do that without putting a lot of your soul on display.
Yep. Which also, even now look, I guarantee you have read a billion times more fanfic than I have. I basically have read none. So I'm not that familiar with it, but I would assume that is true even in quote unquote normal fan fiction. Okay. But especially so when this is, the whole point of this is not just to be a fan fiction this guy wrote, it is to be a way of delivering ideas. It's you're supposed to learn something from this. It is in some sense didactic, and that makes it so much worse.
Well, yeah, you've kind of made the point that I was leading up to, is that normally I try not to... No, it's fine. It's good. We're on the same page. I try not to draw conclusions going off of someone's fiction to how it applies to your real life, because I think it's the inverse of the like video games cause violence argument, where I think it's really regressive and harmful for people to take ideas from fiction and automatically assume or extrapolate that those must be the beliefs of the author, or that if they write terrible things, that it indicates they're a terrible person. I think it's extremely aggressive and harmful.
Agreed.
That being said, as you just said, if you've spent multiple decades on the internet espousing your nonfiction views, and now you've written this piece of fiction that your views are one-to-one with, even though at the beginning he's like, the things that the characters say don't necessarily reflect my views. And it's like, well, I can find exactly on the internet where you are passionately arguing this case as a deeply held belief, and that's also what's happening in the text. So while I don't assume that you love every piece of manipulation that Draco Malfoy does, the core ideas of this text reflect your beliefs. And thus this is fair game, and I'm going to get very snitty about this.
Well, also, there is no sense in which our tearing this to shreds is punching down. I guarantee you, Yudkowsky is more wealthy and influential than you will ever be, Leighton. Yeah. So I think it's, I'm trying to get on his good side.
Nice. Because, yeah. Keep dunking on me. Put me in my place.
Yeah. No, like this guy has power, right? This guy has people's respect. We're small potatoes compared to him. And this is not some rando guy who wrote a fanfic. This is a person who is, you know, it was important enough to be a big part of Adam Becker's book, for example. Right. So
yes.
this is a person of note.
And I also want to say, you know, because I've been trying to see what people like about it. And time and again, I kept seeing people say, well, it has good grammar and punctuation, which can't be said for a lot of fan fiction.
Not even entirely true.
Yeah. Which also, you dilettante, you're telling me that you don't read fan fiction because, yeah, of course, you can find any number of them that don't have proper grammar and punctuation because these people are, many of them are autodidacts. And it doesn't have to be proper, but there are so many more that do have it. And so clearly you don't take this seriously as a format or an art form unless it's caged within this rationalist thing. So I must read it because it's educational. So that annoys me greatly.
I don't understand, for something that is supposed to be, I mean, explicitly educational, how is it so bad at educating? This is the thing I kept bumping up, because these are things like, again, a lot of this stuff he's talking about, fundamental attribution error, like Bayes' theorem. I know this stuff. This stuff is, I mean, this is important to me. It's not my area of training, but this is stuff I've spent, you know, as part of like the skeptics kind of movement. You talk about this stuff. This is important.
Yeah.
This is stuff I'm into. This is stuff I'm interested in. I should have been understanding more of what he was talking about. And he would say stuff where it'd be like, it's not even that it's wrong. It's that it's just so poorly written that you can't really get it. Because you and I are both smart people. If someone was conveying something clearly, and by the way, some of these things, you know, like many ideas, you don't expect it to just look at it and get it immediately. You have to think about it for a while. But so many times I would like go back and reread a little, you know, a little explication of whatever point he was trying to make. And I was like, how do I not get it? Because I know that this is a thing I understand, but I don't understand the way you're saying it.
It's almost never situationally appropriate, which is part of the issue. Like, it feels like whenever he presents, like, have you heard of XYZ problem? And it's always kind of like shoving the plot point into the box of that, where it's like, that's not actually what's happening here. You're just kind of describing a similar thing. This doesn't apply. So why are we... And the thing that I kept seeing in people talking about this and defending it is that there's sort of this, like, this isn't quite No True Scotsman, but this idea where, oh, it's really foundational, it's very educational, and then people criticize it, and then they're like, it's just a fan fiction, don't worry about it too much, you shouldn't be thinking about it so much. Is that appropriate to say that it's similar to No True Scotsman?
Yes. I mean, I think it's in that wheel. So for those of you who don't know, Leighton, do you want to summarize the No True Scotsman argument?
Well,
or logical fallacy or whatever?
An informal fallacy in which one modifies a prior claim in response to a counterexample by asserting the counterexample is excluded by definition.
So basically, the True Scotsman thing is like, you know, you say something like every Scotsman wears a kilt. I forget what the original thing is, and you'll be like, well, that person's that's a Scotsman and he's not wearing a kilt, and you'd be like, well, he's not a true Scotsman. He's actually not, because of blah blah, you know, he's standing across the border on the other side of Hadrian's Wall, you know, whatever. Like that sort of thing. You might maybe call it special pleading or something too, but I don't know. I mean, it's somewhat of just a non sequitur where you're like, oh.
And would you believe that I manipulated this situation like a true Slytherin to force you to explain something to the audience because I'm 5 steps ahead at all times?
Well, you sound like you're, what, 11, 12?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am.
Well, what's interesting, can I tell you, since we started reading this, my kid turned 11. Mm-hmm. So not only am I reading a book about the world's smartest person who happens to be 11, I'm interacting on a daily basis with a real true 11-year-old who, while I'm reading this, is like screaming the lyrics to Steve's Lava Chicken at me an inch away from my face. It's there is something particularly awful about reading these precocious asshole children who act not like human beings, but as, genius robots.
Yeah, and your daughter is incredibly smart.
My daughter is very smart.
And, I feel like if you're going to set the rules of your world, as with any piece of fiction, you're kind of, by engaging with it, you're entering with an agreement that it's like, okay, I will accept X, Y, and Z because these are the consistent rules of your world. So you kind of have to get in on, okay, none of these children talk like adults. That doesn't make it any less fucking obnoxious. So that's not really my issue with it. I accept that they're like this, whatever. And there is indeed a plot explanation of why Harry in particular is so intelligent. But guess what? You don't find that out until the full length of War and Peace.
Yeah.
Does that feel worth it to you?
I want to say, actually, I want to say a couple positive things here first. Okay. I love the basic idea of, what if a scientist suddenly comes into a world of magic? That's a really cool and interesting idea. I guarantee it's been done before. But the idea of I live my life by the scientific method, and suddenly I'm confronted with, actual like magic, and I'm going to try to figure it out. I think that rules. I love that as like a kind of basic framing of a system. In this context, I hate it. But as a general plot or a general idea for a book, very cool. And of course, there have been plenty of works of like, there's like a science world, the magic world, or whatever. But the idea of someone like being like, okay, what experiments are we doing? How am I going to figure this out? These things seem impossible. I think that's actually very cool and interesting.
Yeah, and it sounds like Methods of Rationality spawned a bunch of other Harry Potter fan fictions in this same zone. And it's really kind of turning a very soft magic system into a hard magic system, which I think for many of the readers of the original Harry Potter would probably not be into. And probably a good moment to talk about, as any good Zillennial, I was a massive Harry Potter fan, and I was in the perfect age range to appropriately age up as the successive books were coming out. I had my first grade teacher who I stayed in touch with all through my grades. We would go see every movie together.
Oh, that's cute.
I was at the midnight release of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Like, I was fucking into it. And I think that had I read this, I was into a very Potter musical, formative YouTube stuff, Neil Cicerega's Potter Puppet Pals. Like, I was all fucking over it.
Were you into the Harry and the Potters band?
I was not. But if I had read Methods of Rationality, which was published between 2010 and 2015, which would have been the prime period, sort of further along than my big years of it.
And you're a teenager at that point, so that's
I would have loved it. Because I think it speaks to a very specific strain of when you're a teenage outcast who's really, really smart, and you hate your teachers because you hate how they talk down to you, and you don't like kids your age, and you're against the whole school system, and you think that if you were in charge, you could change things, and that you think sports are stupid, and anybody who doesn't put all of their, points into being intelligent is an NPC. If I had read this at that time, I think I would be a worse person now.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And
that's saying something.
Yeah, I'm an evil Slytherin bitch now, but it's which anybody who hasn't read Methods of Rationality, this universe kind of redefines what Slytherin is, and that's one of the things that I'll give it a point, that it kind of becomes about the goal to make Slytherin less awful by getting all of the race science out of it, which is like, okay, cool. Which is weird considering how into eugenics Yudkowsky is in real life.
That's a whole thing.
Because only smart people should breed to create super babies. Anyway, back to the thing that I was going to say. Naturally, with the way that things have gone with Jowling, Cowling, Rowling, she has used her influence and billions. Here, first of all, fuck her. We unequivocally support trans people.
That's absolutely the case.
She's fucking ghoulish. I kind of already said that.
Has burned whatever massive goodwill she accumulated by writing a beloved series of books, by adopting a stance that is just on its face awful and stupid.
Yeah, and uses bad quote unquote science to back it up. Anyway, the way that I was going to frame it is that Sam Altman and Peter Thiel put their billions in. If they want to spend millions of dollars on Miri, which has published 3 papers and then is very opaque about what the very important work they're doing is. If they want to dump their money into that, fine. Compared to J.K. Rowling, who uses her billions to funnel money into causes and political movements that actively take away the rights of trans people, I'd rather you give your money to the bullshit L. Ron Hubbard of our times here. So, yeah. Anyway, all of that to say that I was pretty primed for this in terms of being a massive Harry Potter fan as a kid. Not that that gives me any more qualifications here, but I'm very familiar. And in fact, at a certain point where I was really crashing out on reading this fan fiction and was like, I cannot take another second of this. On Wednesday, I took a break and I reread the first 3 Harry Potter books in a day because fuck you. They're accessible. They're readable. They're light. They're not incredible. You get through them quick. It's snappy.
Yeah, especially that first one, just like you blast through it.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I'm 90% of the way through this.
Yeah. And then you're in chapter 5 of this.
Yeah. And they're formulaic. And 4 and up is where they start like really jerking themselves off. But
yeah. And
whatever.
But by contrast, I read the first 3 actually with Audrey a few years ago. I've seen all the movies and that's it. That is what I know about Harry Potter. I did try to watch, what's the movie? Fantastic Breasts and Where to Find Them. I did watch that. Actually, it was really interesting. Really short. It was like 3 or 4 minutes. And you actually wouldn't believe what happens in this movie. They definitely find the breasts and then, oh boy, this kind of a plot twist, I guess, in a sense. But
okay, wait,
anyway,
I've got something here. Newt Scamander hug and kiss? No,
okay. That was close.
Bad.
But I don't really know Harry Potter at all. Like I remember some shit from the movies. Basically, I just went to them to see the British actors I liked do stuff. And I'll watch Alan Rickman in anything. I'll watch David Thewlis in anything. Emma Thompson, like all these amazing Brendan Gleeson, right? All these like incredible actors who are like British, but yeah, Michael Gambon, Richard Harris, very briefly, right? Just the first one, I think, is that right? And then he was replaced with Michael Gambon.
Yeah.
But yeah, like incredible actors. And of course now, Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Thompson have, grown. They grew up into fantastic, interesting actors.
Emma Watson.
Did I say that?
You said Thompson.
Oh yeah. Sorry. I meant Watson. But yeah, so I'm a very casual, observer of these things. And I didn't remember half these characters or what was going on. I didn't know the very basics, but that's basically it. So, but my point somewhat in saying that is it's harder for me to know where this really diverges from the original. And so when you say, oh, that's a different characterization of Slytherin, that had not occurred to me because I just don't know it.
Slytherin is about ambition, but because of how one note she writes it really comes down to like, this is the one that's racist because all of the bad guys are in Slytherin
stuff, right?
Yeah. So I thought, anyway, we'll get to it when we get to it, but I'll say that Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality is 660,000 words, which is as long as the first 4 books plus half of the Order of the Phoenix.
Oh my God.
And that's covering 1 year at Hogwarts.
I was going to ask this if this is really just the first year.
It is.
Fuck. I had a thing when I stopped. I was like, actually, wait, are they going to do like the whole, is this going to try to be like 4 years or whatever?
At least that would
really
justify the word count somewhat, but
who has the... I realize that Yudkowsky is like, his whole thing is long form blogging. Who has the time to write this? And was this... There's no editor, right? I mean...
yeah, I was about to say, Brian, when you don't have an editor or anybody to rein you in, you could write as much as you want.
Yes. So
and don't
I'm
even worry about it.
That there is nobody editing this. Now, what is interesting... Okay, you probably know this. This was released kind of serially, right? He would put things up, the blog would read it and comment. At least early on, there's something where he actually, with acknowledgement, takes like alts from, I guess, his blog community. But people are reading this. He's posting this in spurts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Over how many years? A long time.
5.
That's it? Fuck.
Yeah, somehow that's worse, you know?
Yeah.
And I think part of it, the escape from Azkaban arc that I got through and is kind of the highlight, heavy air quotes for me. As with many fan fictions, it's kind of impossible to write hundreds of thousands of words of fan fiction and not improve as a fiction writer. And that felt a little bit like What Was It Play once you get to that point where it's like, okay, he knows the characters better. There's probably been a good amount of time between these. It's more engaging. And then it goes straight back to Ender's Game shit. So it's like, well, okay, you've squandered all my goodwill. Nice.
Well, let's really dive in. So I'm assuming this is probably going to be the first of 2 episodes of our show that we're in right now. I mean, we're at 45 minutes. We essentially haven't started talking about any specifics. So,
yeah, it's kind of amazing.
I think we should really get into it. Do you have any more like overarching thoughts you'd like to...
My big overarching thing about drawing the connections between the themes in this book and Yudkowsky's real beliefs, I'll probably save mostly to the end because I think we'll talk about it on a more granular level. And I think there's kind of a bigger connection to make. And I also wanted to reiterate Adam Becker's comparison that so much of this is like evangelical Christianity. And in my opinion, even closer to Scientology, because you have somebody who's using science fiction as a funnel to get you into this like rapture cult. What is this fear that AI is going to kill us all in 5 years, but the rapture dressed up in a different way, and this whole rationality thing of like, you're going to change the way that you're thinking. It's a get smart quick scheme. And like the idea of debugging, of like changing your thought processes, like Dianetics.
You can't go through your traditional academic circles if you want to be truly smart because
don't trust authority.
Yeah, don't trust authority. These people don't know what they're talking about, which is all over this fucking book. And also, as you say, Yudkowsky is an autodidact and, is clearly advocating for that path.
Yeah, and I want to say up front, Yudkowsky stopped going to school after 8th grade. And under no circumstances do I want to say that people who are homeschooled or self-taught are any less smart or valid than people who went through the traditional routes of academia. However, it would be one thing if he understood like that he didn't know what he didn't know. But the fact that he's kind of made his whole career off of sneering at experts who've been doing this forever. And there's so many examples of that in his essays where he'll point at something that like lifelong physicists or philosophers have said, discounting it out of hand as like, you're too dumb to even talk to me because you're not on my level. Or like, I see this as a rather elementary problem.
So I'll point out one specific example from this. I forget what chapter, I'm not even going to look it up, mentioned something about, quote, timeless formulations of quantum mechanics. Now, to very briefly state my credentials, I am...
your priors?
My priors.
Your epistemic status?
I am, or when I was an academic, I was a quantum field theorist. Now, I would say my area of expertise was quantum physics, okay? Now, what that doesn't mean, there's a whole branch of quantum physics where people are studying what they call foundational issues. And actually, that's something I don't know much about. These are like the deep philosophical questions, which, is the kind of stuff Adam Becker actually talked about in his first book. So that stuff, actually, I'm not very well versed in. But, Would I be considered an expert on quantum physics? Undeniably, yes. I have never heard of quote unquote timeless formulations of quantum mechanics. And there's a couple. Yes, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, so I want to say that in one chapter, he is referring to this idea as a concrete, proven thing. A few chapters later, science, because he puts little preambles to these chapters, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Science disclaimers. Commenter points out that the theory of empathy in chapter 27, you use your own brain to simulate others, isn't quite a known scientific fact. The evidence so far points in that direction, but we haven't analyzed the brain circuitry and proven it. Similarly, timeless formulations of quantum mechanics, alluded to in chapter 28, are so elegant that I'd be shocked to find the final theory had time in it, but they're not established yet either.
Okay. This single sentence made me actually lose my mind because you can point to about a billion things that are, quote, really elegant, but are simply not true. And this is, by the way, a criticism you hear of string theory occasionally. It's so elegant that it has to be true. That is number one thing that any rationalist should realize, is that nature kind of doesn't care about elegance, and also your definition of elegance is not someone else's. So when you say this is a particularly elegant theory, that is just a personal opinion. Now, it may be shared by a lot of people, but I have never heard of this, and that could just be because I don't know it. Okay, maybe this is a widely studied thing. I really don't know. I did a brief Google, didn't seem to find anything that was big, but I didn't look that hard. Talking about this like it is not only a thing that people know, but also, it's so elegant, it's got to be true. I think that's nuts.
I find it so disingenuous. I find it so disingenuous that he would only say this after being called out on it. So how am I supposed to trust anything that you say? And he does this again later.
Exactly this.
Where he later, I wish I could find the exact thing, but my notes for people who are listening, considering this is 600,000 words, they are so long that it's a lot harder to parse these notes than it is the other books that we've done. Because at least Dan Brown's readable. Good God.
Dan Brown moves. I was counting down. By the way, something that really drove me nuts is that the time estimate on the Kindle app is just plain wrong here. There were a few times I was like, oh, thank God, 1 minute left in the chapter. And then like 10 minutes later or whatever, I was like, what the? Wah!
Yeah,
It's not an official Kindle file. We had to
I had to convert it.
Whatever. But I was so excited at one point. I was like, oh my God, I'm almost done. Nope. Time estimates are off in this book.
But okay, so he does this again, and maybe I'll find the exact thing when we're going through it a little bit more, but where he does the same thing where he's saying people have pointed out that this thing is not quite correct, but it's a theory that I've developed.
Yes.
It's like, you motherfucker.
Cough,
you can't
cough,
do
right?
that.
Doesn't he have a cough?
Yeah. It's so it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too here. You can't say that this is educational and that you're teaching people, and then when people call you on it, you say, well, that's not really true, but it's just a fan fiction.
Also, positioning yourself as some kind of expert on these things that you are not an expert on and don't understand is very, very bad form. And, might I add, irrational. Like,
it's his entire bit, which is like shocking. He speaks with authority on so much stuff that it's like, dude, I cannot trust you. You don't cite anything. You don't back it up. You say it argumentatively. Like he constantly is casting, not only in this, he casts anybody who is like established in the field as wrong or stupid or irrational, and then throws a shit fit when anybody says something kind of condescending about him, and then starts criticizing them on the basis that they said something condescending. And it's like, dude, you don't know how to write anything that isn't condescending. This is one of the most condescending things I've ever read.
Indeed. And it has, now I will say, again, in his defense, it's quite clear you're not always supposed to be on Harry Potter's side, right?
Yes.
He does go out of his way to say, okay, Harry was wrong and dumb to do this. Like, it's not total Mary suing wish fulfillment type stuff. Yeah. And his mouthpiece is not an infallible, paragon of virtue. He does at a few points say Harry was wrong about this. Also, he's a fucking child, so maybe he doesn't know everything. But the problem is he is so often presented as this preternaturally brilliant genius that you kind of don't really believe it when he says, oh, actually, this, don't take him too seriously when he says this. Like,
it's
okay, this was bad. Yeah.
This is a didactic text. JK, it's just
right.
a fan fiction. Don't take it seriously.
That's 100% it. It's like, okay, it's hard to, you can't have it both ways.
It's very, very frustrating. And as I've read further through it, and I also made sure that I checked what the conclusion of this whole narrative is, because I don't want to say in this discussion, like, oh, he never resolved this or this never went anywhere.
Yeah.
It is kind of the whole point that Harry learns why he is this way and how it ties into the narrative and sort of making the choice. Like, he gets part of the reason that I read slightly further than we did is Harry does get some character development and becomes a little bit more humane, understanding that he doesn't always have to be right, that his like Machiavellian schemes hurt other people. He turns into a prison abolitionist after going to Azkaban. So there is development there, but I should not have to read the entirety of the Brothers Karamazov to see that. Karamazov. Did I say it wrong again?
I think you did.
Fuck.
I think you said Karamazov. Anyway, no, exactly. And it's, look, as you say, you can't really judge it until you're done with it, a thing that I patently refuse to do. Now, is this the time to tell you my big theory about how he wraps this up? Okay. So one of the central questions, now, by the way, this is based on nothing other than a guess on my part.
Okay. Because the narrative is a puzzle that you can get the answer to?
I guess, yeah. Well, actually, this is relevant to that section. So one of the big questions that comes up a lot, because everything comes up a lot in this book, is why is magic the way it is? Why is it that you have to say Wingardium Leviosa in a particular way, right? And there's a section where Harry concludes that it has something to do with, fucking Atlantis or something, which I don't even know if that's in the original book, but bringing it back to Atlantis, I was like, okay. So it's the kind of thing that he seems to be hinting at, and not hinting at, he actually says, the founders of magic kind of made it this way. So my theory is that the founder of magic is Harry Potter, and there's some kind of time travel thing where Harry goes back in time at the end of this, because there's so much fucking time travel in this book, and in fact is the cause of all this irrationality that you can, basically he is the founder of magical everything on Earth and made these decisions himself.
That's a great theory, Brian.
That's my theory.
That's a really great theory. Would that it was anything close. Okay, uncharitable summation. Hermione gets murdered. And then...
Wait, you're telling me what actually happens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hermione gets murdered.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoilers. Quirrell obviously is Voldemort. And so...
I was wondering if he was going to change that. That part, at least I remembered.
Yeah, and I would say that the strongest point of this work are the conversations that Harry has with Quirrell, because it is a thing that's interesting in that we get to see, here's Voldemort if Harry didn't know. It's sort of like the Mad-Eye Moody dynamic, where that's not actually Mad-Eye Moody, where it's like kind of an evil instructor grooming him to be a certain way. And I think that's an interesting thing to explore, and it gets more interesting in this sort of Azkaban arc where he's getting him, he has groomed him into shifting the Overton window of his morals and giving him justifications for doing so. And I think it's really well done in that sense. Anyway, to get to the end, Hermione gets murdered. They're kind of... That's a great question. It's kind of a whodunit, to my understanding.
Okay.
So remember, I'm talking about stuff that I've only read summaries of, because I might be getting it wrong.
Oh.
It's kind of a fusion of the ending of Sorcerer's Stone with the mirror being how they get the stone. Obviously, Voldemort wants the stone because he's occupying this Quirrell body that isn't really... There's some lore with who Quirrell... He's like David Monroe from the Honorable House of Monroe or something, who's like a famous wizard, but Voldemort's taken over his body, and Quirrell's dying, he's going to die. And obviously Harry is very against the idea of death and thinks death is evil, which we'll get into. But he promises that he will revive Hermione if he helps him. And so he defeats Dumbledore. Harry defeats Dumbledore by sending him through the mirror and making him get trapped outside of time.
Cool.
And then they go to like, Voldemort pulls a gun. Voldemort pulls a gun on Harry. There's like big, yeah, he pulls a gun on Harry, and there's like a big showdown with Death Eaters. And then Harry uses like transfigured razor thin wire to like decapitate all of the Death Eaters and cut off Voldemort's hands. And then he like Hermione is brought back to life as like a part troll, part unicorn. Anyway, so it's like, it's that, but the reason that Harry has that cold, dark, angry, and like hyper intelligent side is because that is Voldemort inside of him, and that Voldemort tried to kill him because there was a prophecy that if Harry became the powerful like science magic fusion, that he would destroy the universe. And so it ended up putting some of Voldemort's brain and 65 years of knowledge into Harry's head, and that is why he is so incredibly precocious. That is my bad summary of the ending of Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. I'm curious to see how it actually plays out.
Yeah, and there's also some kind of puzzle, like.
He asked people to write what the ending would be. Like he presented it as like.
Is there like what I would consider a puzzle, like the kind of puzzle I would write in this book? It's very. I texted you. To me, it's very suggestive that Harry is on a 26-hour sleep cycle. Because in my line of work, when you see 26, you think letters of the alphabet, right? So there's a lot of specific times in this book. So many that it is absolutely baffling, where he'll be like, and he went back to 4:23 p.m. I was like, why are there so many specific times in this book?
Right.
It happened enough where I was like, oh, maybe is there like a code that you're supposed to be deciphering? I absolutely don't want to think about this. But with a 26-hour sleep cycle, already tying 26 to time, and then listing a lot of specific times, if I was going to hide a puzzle or a message in the book, that's one of the places I would do it.
Yeah, I don't think there's that. I'll read the preface to this, which is, the text contains many clues, obvious clues, not so obvious clues, truly obscure hints, which I was shocked to see some readers successfully decode, and massive evidence left out in plain sight. This is a rationalist story. Its mysteries are solvable and meant to be solved. Skipping ahead. All science mentioned is real science, but please keep in mind that beyond the realm of science, the views of the characters may not be those of the author. Not everything the protagonist does is a lesson in wisdom, and advice offered by darker characters may be untrustworthy or dangerously double-edged. So that...
Okay.
Now, just because in my head, this is becoming a three-parter, which it absolutely shouldn't be, because I don't want to think or talk about this more than I have to. So we should probably just get into the fucking meat and potatoes.
Well, I was going to say, I have an idea, which is we can make this first part like kind of general criticisms, and then in part two, like get into the nitty gritty of like
I like
going through the text.
Yes. So maybe we say a few more words about the overall general things, which we've kind of touched a bit, but there are other things that I wanted to say, which was, as I frequently say, no, you know what? I'm going to go through the author's introduction because it ties into these grander things that I want to say, because this is important to understanding where the universe canon diverges from the books.
Yes.
Author's introduction. Something, somewhere, some when must have happened differently. Petunia Evans married Michael Varys. Varys?
Yeah, sure.
Michael Varys.
You know as much as I do with that.
A professor of biochemistry at Oxford. Harry James Potter Evans Varys grew up in a house filled to the brim with books. He once been a math teacher who didn't know what a logarithm was. He's read Gödel, Escher, and Bach, and Judgment Under Uncertainty, Heuristics, and Biases, and Volume 1 of the Feynman Lectures on Physics. And despite... Feynman. That's fine to me, man.
Mm-hmm.
And despite what everyone who's met him seems to fear, he doesn't want to become the next Dark Lord. He was raised better than that. He wants to discover the laws of magic and become a god. Hermione Granger is doing better than him in every class except broomstick riding. Draco Malfoy is exactly what you would expect an 11-year-old boy to be like if Darth Vader were his doting father. Professor Quirrell is living his lifelong dream of teaching defense against the dark arts, or as he prefers to call his class, battle magic. His students are all wondering what's going to go wrong with the defense professor this time. Dumbledore is either insane or playing some vastly deeper game which involves setting fire to a chicken. Minerva McGonagall needs to go off somewhere private and scream for a while.
And if you can make it through that and want to keep reading, then this book is for you.
Yeah. And then there's another, the opinions of the characters in the story are not necessarily those of the author. What warm Harry thinks is often meant as a good pattern to follow, especially if Harry thinks about how he can cite scientific studies to back up a particular principle. But not everything Harry does or thinks is a good idea. That wouldn't work as a story. And the less warm characters may sometimes have valuable lessons to offer, but those lessons may also be dangerously double-edged. So that is sort of where canon is diverging. And I'll point out that many characters from kind of the rest of the series are either differently aged or kind of come in as cameos. For example, there's a bit where they are learning how to cast the Patronus charm against the Dementors, which is part of Quirrell's battle magic class.
Yep.
There you go. But they bring in Remus Lupin to teach this particular thing just to drag him back into it.
So he can there's wolf out for a second, which he definitely doesn't do and is not mentioned.
Yeah. Nymphadora Tonks, who is an adult in the later, she's a member of the Order of the Phoenix, is now a student who is like a year 6 or 7 at Hogwarts, who kind of gets involved in the main plot. Ron and Hagrid barely present.
Pop in and out occasionally.
Yeah, which is fine. That's what fan fiction does.
Sure. Who cares?
Mad-Eye Moody comes in as an Auror in the Azkaban arc, which is earlier. So there's like a fusion of a lot of the different characters in the books coming into this first year thing.
Had the books completed by the time you started writing this? They were all out, or it was towards...
I think so. Maybe Deathly Hallows.
He talks about Deathly Hallows in this.
See, the thing is that he's publicly claimed that he's only read the first 3 books, which cannot possibly be true.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So another broad thing I'll say about this story is that, as I am often a proponent of on this show, I love unlikable characters. I pretty much exclusively, as a writer, only want to write unlikable characters. Mm-hmm. I think they're great. I think that unlikability getting in the way of enjoying a text in something like We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is one of my favorite books. Eva is fundamentally unlikable, but she's sympathetic and she's compelling. Harry Potter, Evans, Varys in this is extremely...
Can't spell his initials, and I thought about this, without HPV.
Indeed, yes, which is what I've contracted from reading this work.
Mm-hmm.
He is unlikable, but not compelling. And that is the mortal sin of having an unlikable protagonist that you're stuck with for 600,000 words. You cannot just have someone be unlikable and boring. The Google Docs title of where I typed everything was Harry Potter and the Methods of Boring Me to Death.
Yeah. No, he sucks. He's a terrible character in this book. It just fails on every possible level. You don't like him and you don't want to keep reading about him. And that is a deadly combination. At least you should want to keep reading this book. And I honestly can't remember the last time I read something that felt more like pulling teeth than this.
It felt like
especially work. So much work, which I was doing it essentially for work. Actually, I was reading it last night and Audrey was like, Daddy, are you reading because I told her I was reading something for this. She's like, Daddy, are you reading that book for your podcast? And I said, yep. She goes, do you like it? And I said, honey, I really don't like it. Then why are you reading it? I was like, well, because Leighton and I, sometimes we read books that we don't like and we talk about them on the show. Oh, okay. And, it was just one of those things where I had to admit to my daughter,
my
11-year-old, instead of spending time with her, I was doing this. And I was like, fuck.
what is my life? Why do we do this?
Well, especially when you might recall when we talked with Adam about this. I suggested on the episode, I was like, oh my God, we should read this. And do you remember your reaction?
No. And then I suggested it again because my podcasting instinct, if you say or do something that makes me yell no.
Oh, then we have to do it.
It's probably a good idea. It's good for content.
I could not agree more.
And I think that's a thing that I saw brought up a lot in regards to criticism of this, where people would be like, well, if you didn't like it, why did you keep reading? Which, being
that's a fair point. Sure.
Fair point if you're listening to this podcast because you're a rationalist and you're pushing through because you really love HP more and you want to hate on us. There, but for the grace of God, go I. But, if we weren't doing this for content, honestly, this is like me watching Yellow Jackets. It's informative and educational to be a hater. There are ways in which being a hater is unhelpful, and there are ways in which it is creatively enriching. And I think it's something that emotionally people need an outlet for, because otherwise it comes out in weird ways, as demonstrated by Harry and his lack of control over his anger in this narrative. I don't even know where I was going with this.
Well, what I'll say is what interests me specifically about this is its status as a foundational text for this movement and group of people. And the thing that is compelling to me has nothing to do with how well this is written. It is a lot of people love this. And not only is that just a bunch of people, it's also, as I said, a group that I have more than a passing familiarity with, kind of their basic, MO. And it's very adjacent to the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. And I am personally interested in this because it's like, why do I'm going to be uncharitable here. Why do I fucking hate these people so much? Like, what is it about this that is an immediate turnoff when I start reading the comments and the blogs and stuff? And I'm just like, oh no, what? Why? And it is, again, I have hung out in my days with a lot of pretty smart people. I've been at all sorts of, academic institutions, which I realize in this crowd probably marks me as a jerk or someone not to be listened to. But the people that, and I'm not going to say every academic I've ever met is a saint. That's certainly not true. But they're not like this. Yeah. Like among the people that I knew, the smartest people, there was, for real, a sense of intellectual humility, which seems to be the weird part about this is in print, the words do espouse these beliefs. It's like, you might always be wrong, always check your assumption, that kind of stuff. Yet you can feel in your bones that is not really what's on display here. There's a mismatch between what's being written about and the vibe of, look at how fucking smart I am.
Well, because you're claiming to be a rationalist, but what I'm seeing is that you are rationalizing and retrofitting your beliefs so it fits within this framework that you've invented to be convincing, and that this is how logic wins every situation.
Yes.
Like, how do you not question whether the thing that you've created to communicate your arguments works or is like a way, because reading this, it's so alienating as someone who already had a bit of a bone to pick with Rationalist and whatnot. Mm-hmm. It's so alienating because it's like, ew, is this what these people are like?
That's
like if you were coming into
it
it totally blind. No, I know. But if you're coming into it like not knowing about Less Wrong, Slate Star Codex, etc., is it Star Slate or Slate Star? I always forget.
Originally Slate Star, now
it's Astral Codex
10. Yeah.
Not knowing any of that, if you read Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, unless you're like a teenager who agrees with this like anti-establishment, anti-education thing, I can't see anything other than being totally turned off, which it seems is not the case for a lot of people, which is interesting because that discrepancy feels so obvious to me.
I totally agree. That is part of the thing that is compelling to me, is like, why is this not just an immediate turnoff? And I think part of it is kind of what you said. If you were a child when you read this, you'd be like, oh my God, fucking finally. And certainly not everybody reading this and loving it is a child, but I bet a lot of people, when they first get into this community, as with many communities, are young and looking at young outcasts and looking for people who are kind of like them, who are smart. And this is just funneling those powers into what I regard as completely the wrong direction and attitude.
Yes. And I think there's kind of, within the text, there's this idea, like with the sorting hat, where it's saying, like, it would do you good to go to Hufflepuff. It would probably make you a better person. If you go to Slytherin, that's a different path. Ravenclaw, you're going to be reinforced by other people who are really smart and who value that. And I think similarly in real life, if you go down this path of getting into the rationalist community very young, there's a good chance it'll help you think better, that you'll meet people, et cetera, et cetera.
Learning this stuff is, I think, unquestionably important. You should understand what a logical fallacy is, what the logical fallacies that people know about are, how to be aware of your own biases. All that stuff, I think, is important and worth knowing, and everybody should know it.
Yeah, and I can't fundamentally disagree with what do I believe and why do I believe it. That's a good question.
Absolutely not. It's a good question.
But that question and the logic of how you structure your arguments should not take precedence over your actual everything else, or like emotionally connecting with other human beings, or like listening to other people, or research. Anyway, what I was going to say is that if you're pulling young people into this pipeline, there is a not insignificant chance that they veer off and go into like neo-reactionary, alt-right, because it's very easy to get from Slate Star Codex, Less Wrong, Curtis Yarvin. Like it, and then also the fact that it's, some of it is kind of like lefty on its face, but in the example of like Slate Star Codex, it's like, wait a second, wait a second, whoa, why are you saying this about race and women? Like it's kind of snuck in there, and because it's under this rationalist umbrella, it's like, well, actually, the eugenics makes sense.
Yeah, right. That you always have to be skeptical.
And I'm not saying that the whole community is like that, but if by dint of your name as a community is rationalist, anybody who opposes you is irrational.
That's exactly what I was about to say. And we talked about this with Adam too. It's the same thing. You see this a lot in the skeptics movement. Well, again, briefly, people in skeptics are like, what if we call ourselves the brights? And anyone, or objectivists or whatever, anyone who positions themselves as I am the standard bearer for rationality and sensibility, you always, always, always have to be wary of that. There are ways of doing it. For example, saying, I'm a scientist. There's a nice way of saying, hey, I believe in the scientific method and I try to do that. I think skeptic is actually a pretty good term for that, but some people disagree. But there's no value judgment that's kind of, I think, present in that, although implicitly there is, for sure.
Yeah.
But something about, I don't know, something about the word rationalist, as you say, implies anyone who opposes you for any reason is now irrational.
And if you cannot argue with me through this very strict rubric that we made up, then you're not worth my time. And anybody who disagrees with me is inherently dumber than I am. And this is just like doing a cursory glance at Less Wrong stuff. It just comes up again and again and again, where it's like, well, you didn't watch the 4-hour video that I just linked, so I'm not even going to continue to engage with you.
And something that I think these folks would admit, but feels like it needs to be said out loud, is not everything can be subject to fucking rationality. Like, there are lots of arguments and feelings and whatever out there that this is not the domain for this. It's not the time or the place. I've been married almost 20 years. I'm aware of this phenomenon. Not every disagreement you have with another person can be solved with, and therefore blah, blah, blah. Like, some things you are not rationality based, and you have to not just know that, but like admit it openly and work it into your practice of how you disagree with others.
Learn to lose. A major lesson of this text is supposed to be learn to lose, which Yudkowsky seems fundamentally incapable of doing.
I was going to say, one of the things I did like a lot is I love that idea for a lesson, which is we are going to fail now. I have a friend who came up with an idea for something he would do with teenagers occasionally, which was called competitive failure. And what he would do is he would give them, like, part of his, is kind of in a scene where a lot of kids were like very high achieving. I don't even know if this like made it out of his like immediate circle, but I remember talking to him about it. It was into like very, high achieving kids, college, getting ready for college and that sort of thing. And he's like, what these kids need to learn is how to fuck up and like make it not really a thing. And he'd be like, okay, go try to convince a stranger to change shirts with you, or like stuff that is weird, stuff that is probably not going to go. And I just thought it was such a great lesson of like, learn to fail. And
you're not going to die and the world isn't going to end, which is
a good lesson, especially for kids. Yeah, for like high achieving kids who are used to getting 98s on every test or whatever, and getting an A- is like the end of the fucking world. I don't think it's a terrible, which Harry Potter clearly fucking is, and so is Hermione. I don't think it's a terrible lesson to be like, learn what happens when you lose. I like that.
Going back to my sort of this, and then the point of like, you would be a better person if you got sorted into Hufflepuff. A lot of things about this are really juvenile in viewpoint, right? As we talked about, if I had read this as a teenager, I would have a much different view of it. And it's this, I think it's the same strain of, well, why do I have to learn these specific dates in history? Why do I have to do double-spaced MLA citation papers? Like, why aren't we learning about practical stuff? Like how to do your taxes, and like school isn't, why are teachers like,
when am I ever going to use this?
Sometimes the curtains are just blue. Which school and teachers are teaching you how to learn. There are lessons that are gained socially and interpersonally in school that are very difficult to replicate outside of it. Yeah, it sucks that you do a group project and you get put with people and you do all the work. That's a learning experience. Having a teacher tell you that you're wrong, giving you a bad grade, other people disagreeing with your ideas, meeting people with different viewpoints from you, understanding that you need to listen to sometimes other people are going to have different opinions or different expertise, and you should incorporate that into your worldview, especially when you go into college and there's a higher level of this. Again, not to say that if you don't have those things, it's a problem, but I think that this text really exemplifies what happens when you don't have that and maintain that I am the smartest, I shouldn't have to turn in an essay, I should just be able to do whatever I want. Yeah. That would be tempered by if you just listen to other people, or like took the time to have respect for other people's viewpoints and not focus so much on being right all the time. Mm-hmm. Which is a thing that personally, it took me a long time to learn. Like,
absolutely. No, it's... the phrase, I forget, it might even been on his blog that I saw it, Strong Opinions Weekly Held. I've seen that phrase, maybe even from this community originally. I like that. I like Strong Opinions Weekly Held. Just be willing to change your mind a lot. And it doesn't matter if you're wrong about stuff. I mean, sometimes it matters if you're, say, making public policy, but be willing to be wrong. And this is something I often explained my job to my family and loved ones when I was a scientist. Is I would tell them my job is I show up at work and I get to hang out with my close friends at work that I've known very well and who I respect as people and intellectuals. And they tell me all day why I'm wrong and dumb. And then we figure something out. And getting to a point where you realize, fight for your viewpoints, but if you're wrong, you're wrong. Then you figure out what's right. Love it. That's the way people should be.
And if you're constantly lauded as one of the great thinkers of our age without doing much other than blogging, which is not to say that isn't important. Obviously, what the fuck do philosophers do? They're having thoughts and they're putting them out there.
If you think about it, Socrates was the original blogger.
It's true. He really was. But if you do that, and the viewpoint that you push is strongly, and having forecasted for the past 25 years that in 5 years there's going to be an extinction level event if AI becomes aware and kills us all. I mean, hold on. I need to find the title of the book that he's about to put out. I think it's, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies is his new book.
That's the name of the book?
Yeah. And
Crazy.
I think that if you are going to be the way that this guy is and as influential that he is, to have spent the past 25 years saying that something's going to come to pass that hasn't come to pass in 5 years, and then consistently keep saying, well, like, no, see, actually this time, or like, I was right about this, at least have the humility to say, okay, I was wrong about this, but what about this? But if you're pushing to so many of your followers with this sort of cult-like environment, which you can kind of see, not to blame him directly for this, but the whole Zizians fiasco and the number of like suicides that have happened within the rationalist community, I'm not blaming him for that, but it is a certain atmosphere where if the belief is that the rapture is coming because of AI and you are the most important people alive because you're the only ones who care about AI safety and who are going to solve this problem, I don't think that's healthy. It's not that I don't think that this is an important problem, but at the end of the day, what are you actually accomplishing, and how much of what you're accomplishing is fear-mongering in like a deeply religious way?
Well, and why are you prioritizing a maybe it'll happen someday type problem to the exclusion of actual real things that we know are happening, climate change, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and also the fact that he's like,
and
if
maybe
a data
some of these, some of these aren't to the exclusion of, but some of them are.
Yeah. But I mean, he's on record as saying, like, if there's a data center that creates this AI before anyone else, I would be in favor of nuking that place, no matter what the human costs would be, where it's like, dude.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to stop this particular episode, unless you have any other overall comments. Now, look, there are definitely people out there who disagree with us on this one. I'm curious if any of them will find this. If you build it, everyone dies. Well, if anyone listens to this show, then we're all fucked, is how I would feel about that. So, us two are kind, rational people, and we will listen to any and all feedback people who listen to this might have. This was our overall of assessment. Yeah, actually, I won't either now that you said.
Yeah.
But we're going to kind of go through the book and talk about some specific moments in part 2.
I can't believe we didn't get into any of it on this first one. There's just
too much to talk about.
Much. It's
a rich text. There's a lot to it. There's many layers. There are layers within layers within layers within layers. So
if only we could take a time turner and go back 2 hours and go back 2 hours again and then go back 2 hours again until we had never read this book at all.
Oh, that would be, Leighton, that would be the dream, because one thing you learned early on in this book is that every single problem can be solved with the time turner. And actually, I did like when McGonagall was like, okay, you got to stop. Like, you're time turning all the time. So...
Well, let me tell you, that doesn't last forever.
No, but as the original time turner said, what's love got to do with it?
See you next time, folks.
Right. Bye. Leighton Night is produced by Brian Wecht and Leighton Gray. Sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/Leighton Night. Follow us on Twitter at Leighton Night, on Instagram at Leighton_Night, or email us at leightonnight@gmail.com.